is the new target number. Now, here's what's already underway, some announcements I made just over the last few days, and leaning into some announcements we'll be making over the course of the next few days. The hospital system alone will provide for 30,000 of those beds. It's important for folks to recognize, and it's obvious when you hear it, that we're much better off using the existing resource and resourcefulness within the hospital system by allowing the hospitals more flex, more capacity to provide resources by using existing staff, using existing facilities, looking at some of the outbuildings on the hospital campuses, looking at the parking lots and getting tents and providing emergency supplies in and around those facilities. The hospitals already came with a surge plan of anywhere from 15 to 20% of their capacity. They are doubling that surge plan now. Phase one that we're announcing today is a surge plan of 40% within that hospital system. So that's what the current hospital system is now working to address internally, and we feel confident in their capacity to deliver that. Externally, outside of the hospital system itself, we are looking to provide 20,000 beds throughout our system. As you know, last few days we announced the acquisition of three major hospitals in the state of California: the Seton Hospital here in Northern California, Long Beach, outstanding leadership, their mayor, community hospital, where they're moving patients much earlier than they otherwise would into that facility, and then of course St. Vincent's down in Los Angeles. In addition to that, we are in deep negotiations and will be soon in contract with a number of other facilities throughout the state, again, Northern California, and currently negotiating in the central part of California. All told, we've got about 3,000 beds now that we have lined up and identified in the short term. Part of the 20,000 the state will be responsible for identifying. Roughly 17,000, I don't mean to throw too many numbers, confuse folks, but 17,000 we need to start stacking in terms of resources throughout the state of California. And that's where we're identifying convention facilities, fairgrounds. We're identifying specific assets throughout the state, including motels and hotels. Again, not just for homeless, but potentially to provide capacity, including skilled nursing facilities and the like. So we're well on their way in terms of identifying those individual assets, and we're well underway of making sure that once the assets are identified, that we can resource them. And what I mean by that is staff them, and staff them with the appropriate levels of support on protective gear, PPE, as we're commonly referring to that. So let me break that down a little bit. Our staffing is going to require more flex. It's going to require more capacity as it relates to existing ratios, as it relates to existing current scope of practice. We're going to have to do more on rules and regulations well within our capacity to deliver, and I think for the system to absorb. We are in advanced negotiations on more prescriptive issues around scope of practice, and as it relates to staffing ratios, we put out an omnibus executive order that already has begun the process of making changes to those protocols. We believe the ability to get fourth-year medical students into the system in that fourth year, getting someone that's almost finished getting their nursing degree, get them licensed earlier, bringing people, annuitants back, retirees back, all of that, you start adding those resources, and we believe we can meet the moment to provide for the human resources, the staffing of those additional beds. We are, in addition to that, though, making a case, and we need to make this case very soberly. And it's one thing to provide the physical space, it's another to provide the human resources, but you got to keep people healthy. You got to keep people safe. And that's why the issue of protected gear is so important to our healthcare workers, more broadly to our frontline workers all throughout the state, defined in many different categories. We are significantly expanding our efforts. We have been expanding them, but now significantly expanding our efforts to procure additional shields and gloves and gowns and coveralls and the like. So much so that we have formally scoped the capacity to go out on the open market across the country, for that matter around the world, to scope out, and by the way, I'm going to be literal in these numbers, 1 billion gloves to procure, 500 million N95 masks, some 200 million shields. You get the picture. We're talking in the magnitude of tens of millions, in some cases, hundreds of millions of units of this personal protective gear. Let me tell you why. A 3-month surge, and let's just assume, for argument's sake, a 3 months surge capacity within our hospital system alone, which is just one part of the larger healthcare delivery system. That would require that 125,000 beds, 75,000 baseline plus the 50,000 surge. That would require, just in 3 months, 200 million sets of PPE. That's, again, gloves and gowns and masks and shields. And that would just exhaust itself in 3 months. So it puts things in perspective when you're watching the news or you're reading something online about a few 100,000 N95 masks that come in, a couple 100,000 gowns, how quickly one goes through that. For every patient, you throw that PPE off. For every room, you throw that PPE off. You can go to a specific hospital, they'll go through hundreds of thousands just in one hospital in just a week. And so in order to procure that, it's going to take an heroic effort. And so we have identified specific asks. We have specific strategies in terms of that procurement and logistics. And we recognize that we as a nation need to reconcile the following. And that is, many of us are competing for the same limited supplies. And as a consequence of that, people are tripping over themselves to make deals that ultimately are raising the cost of these supplies. I was very pleased to just watch President Trump's press conference, and I applaud him and our Attorney General for going after hoarding and going after price gouging. And by the way, that must be done, not just by the federal government, must be done by the state as it is, and also local government. I'll just give you an example. The outstanding leadership, the district attorney in San Diego, that's already been on this, filing cases, not just being aggrieved, but actually moving on this. You're seeing that with other municipalities, and obviously our outstanding Attorney General Becerra, who's on this as well. But it was wonderful to see the federal government take this seriously. But it is incumbent upon governors, not just mayors, not just county leaders, but upon all of us to start aligning our purchasing strategies to recognize that states like California that are uniquely positioned to make large purchases and get the volume discounts that are necessary creates a crowding out of the market that hurts some of the smaller states. And I don't want to be in a position as a Californian deeply committed to the people I represent, but also as an American citizen to take advantage of our purchasing power, our market power, without addressing the legitimate anxiety and needs of some of these smaller state leaders. It's incumbent to begin the process of centralizing the procurement. It is incumbent upon us to address this issue in a much more systemic way. We'll continue in the state of California to punch way above our weight. We're going to be sending literally chartered flights from China into the state of California. We're already working with some of the largest logistics firms in the world, FedEx, UPS, to do just that. We are working all our supply chains and suppliers and brokers and dealers from around the world, subsequently though into factories into China. And we're doing our part domestically. We, by the way, have now 6 California companies, 6, that want to repurpose their facilities to manufacture gowns. We just had a conversation with 25 providers that want to start 3D printing masks in the state of California. Elon Musk, how about this? I told you a few days ago that he was likely to have 1,000 ventilators this week. They arrived in Los Angeles, and Elon Musk is already working with the Hospital Association and others to get those ventilators out in real time. It's an heroic effort. Bloom Energy, we talked about that a couple days ago, repurposing the ventilators. Things that would take a month are taking days because people are stepping up and stepping in a meaningful and very direct way. But the magnitude of what we have to accomplish, we must do together as a nation. And in the absence of our capacity to centralize it nationally, governors, we need to start aligning ourselves to our purchasing protocols in a way where we can bring down the cost curve and also address the anxiety about access. And so I just want other governors to know we are committed to working with you collaboratively in that. We've already had a number of conversations, and we'll work through the NGA, the National Governors Association, and others to really formalize that process, those protocols and procedures. So we're moving on all cylinders. We are very pleased, and I want to thank the administration. President Trump called me yesterday and told me that we already should expect, and he was right, those field medical stations to come into the state of California. 2 arrived, one in Riverside and one in Santa Clara already now have arrived. We'll be putting them up in the convention center in Santa Clara and down in the fairgrounds in Riverside. That was part of the 8 that he committed to the state of California. We're grateful for that. Remember, that's 2,000 beds when all 8 arrived, but 2 already did arrive. And we're already in the process of beginning to resource and ultimately get those things up as we can. And I say as we can, but I also mean as we should, which is we don't rush to do everything overnight to have assets sitting there waiting for the surge. This is done in a very sequential way, in a very methodical way, in a very deliberative way. Again, all what we're referring to now is phase 1 in terms of our acquisition and procurement planning as we bring these units, these numbers to life so that we could keep people healthy and address the anxiety that many of us are fearing or feeling. Let me speak to that. I had a little anxiety, as all of you did, watching the news of all those folks and crowds on our parks out there on the beautiful California coast. Normally, that would light up my heart to see tens of thousands of people congregating down in Malibu and other parts of our beautiful state. And it's understandable people's desire their first weekend now with the new stay-at-home order, some folks testing it. And know that one cannot condemn that, but one can criticize it. We need to practice common sense and socially distance. And that means we need to help you help yourself a little bit more, those folks that were making their way out there, to recognize when you're on a single track trail out in our beautiful wilderness, that single track means going up the mountain and down the mountain, which means it's almost impossible to socially distance. When you're out there and you can't even find parking at a beach, it suggests you're not going to practice social distancing, and it may suggest you may want to find a new location. But to make it easier for you, we're going to shut down all state parking lots, and that will go into effect immediately. Counties, to their credit, are already doing. I talked to a number of mayors last night that moved for their city and their county assets, particularly in the stressed areas of San Diego, Los Angeles, San Mateo County, up into Marin County and Sonoma County. And so we are going to substantially advance what we call these soft closures. There'll be some hard closures, but these are soft closures to reduce the stress on those beaches. I don't want to close big, beautiful, open spaces. Not when we're encouraging people to go outside with intention and purpose, not linger, but to deal with the health needs that we all have of being outdoors and taking a deep breath, practicing common sense and social distancing. And we want to provide a forum for that, but we can't see what we saw over the weekend happen again. Local leaders are leading on this. I congratulate them. The state of California will now shut down all these state parks. What does that mean? The parking lots. And what does that mean? It means 9 of our parking lot facilities in LA County. It means, for example, all the way down in San Diego, Torrey Pines parking lot now shut down, all the way up to Sonoma with the Armstrong Redwoods site going to be shut down. And we're going to be updating our efforts to keep people from overloading and ultimately overburdening the system. And that means I encourage people that want to go to parks in the state of California to go to our parks.ca.gov website to get more information. It will constantly update and provide that information to people that are seeking an appropriate time outside of their home, but not seeking to do what we did this last weekend. So wanted to make that clear. We are stepping up that enforcement, and we are stepping up our efforts to advance closures that will indicate the importance of that enforcement. By the way, just on a personal note, I had a friend of mine who said, boy, I'm out here in Malibu. It's just incredible. It's so packed. I don't know who all these people are. I asked him, I said, but aren't you one of those people? And it reminded me of that old billboard up in Washington State on a crowded freeway. It says, you're not stuck in traffic and you're on a crowded freeway and about 10 minutes go by and you get about 20 feet closer to the billboard and you realize the billboard doesn't just say you're not stuck in traffic. In parentheses underneath that blazing headline, it says you are traffic. Think about that. Society becomes how we behave. You're not stuck in traffic. You are traffic. We are our behaviors. And in order to meet this moment, we need to improve our behaviors. All of us, young and healthy, not just the most vulnerable citizens of the state. And the young and healthy have a unique obligation to the seniors to keep them safe. And you keep them safe by practicing safe social distancing. And you can't do that at a pickup basketball game. You can't do that when you're recreating, as you have in the past. So please, please, let us all step up our game and recognize our obligation, not to ourselves, but to each other to meet this moment. That 50,000 bed number that I just gave you assumes that we're doing that. We have numbers that are substantially higher if we don't. I don't mean that threatening way, quite the contrary. I just mean that in a very sober and honest way, in the purpose of just letting you know we want to bend that curve. We can't bend the curve if everybody's out on a beautiful Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Let me just close on one additional point. There's been a lot of talk about when this will end. Been a lot of national conversations about that. And I've tried to be as transparent as I can based on the expertise that we brought around us and the expertise we source on an hourly, not just daily basis here in the state. One thing I know, when you have a country that just had 100 deaths, that we have some trend lines that are becoming headlines that make us very sober about meeting this moment. The reason we did the stay-at-home order, and the reason I'm pleased that so many other governors across this country have done the same, is we are trying to bend that curve in real time. We could talk about South Korea and China, and it is remarkable. I was just talking to one of the largest retailers in the world. They're opening back up their stores in China, which is that's a wonderful point of optimism. It's a very good thing. But remember what they did. Remember what they did in South Korea, testing everybody. Remember what they did in China that make what we're doing pale in comparison. If you want to bend the curve, we have got to bend to a deeper understanding and meet this moment head on, that we have to act differently. And it's a sum total of quite literally hundreds of millions of people acting differently to meet this moment, maximizing a little bit of their inconvenience in the short term to minimize the extraordinary inconvenience over the long term. And so we are looking the next 8 weeks on our curve, maybe the next 8 to 12 weeks, to address this surge, and again, do it in a thoughtful and pragmatic way, looking at physical resources and beds, looking at protective gear, including new ventilators, to make sure we meet the needs in our ICUs, and of course, the human resources that are so critical to continue to function as we should and you all demand and expect. So some progress and a little bit of promotion for some better behavior from some folks, all of us, and a recognition that the next week or two, we've got a lot of work to do. And we're going to have to get very, very serious and lean in and hit this moment head on. And so that's broad strokes updates for the evening. And of course, here always to answer any questions from members of the media.